The 25-26 Ashes is underway, and blimey, what a start. 19 wickets in the day. Australia finish 123 for 9, trailing England by 49 after bowling England out for 172 from just 32.5 overs. England's shortest completed Ashes first innings since 1887. At that point, it felt worryingly familiar for England down under, but Stokes' men were immense in the field. All 5 seamers, intense, hostile, relentless. Stokes finished with 5 for 23. Archer and Cast picked up 2 each. So the day ends with Australia 123 for 9. And despite Stark's career best figures of 7 for 58, they are behind. Today's Ashes Daily is brought to you by RIVERSTONE Living, redefining independent living for people over the age of 65. Think a combination of luxury 5-star hotel service, amenities, and private members club atmosphere with like-minded neighbours, all built with a well-being offer intentionally built for optimal independence. We're delighted to be working with RIVERSTONE across the Ashes. I'm Yas, and with me today is Phil Walker. Phil, a breathtaking all-action first day. Can you remember a day where the flow of the day swung so dramatically? I was messaging someone who went to bed at lunch with England 105 for 4. They woke up 3 hours later at tea with Australia 15 for 1 after 10 overs. Completely mad day.
Well, I guess the boring answer is this time last year on the same ground between Australia and India. But we don't need to dwell on that. Only 17 wickets fell this time last year. I mean, what a pedestrian and dull day that must have been. 19 fell today. And it contained all the multitudes that Test cricket and only Test cricket can throw at you. Around, what time would we be saying? Around 5 o'clock, maybe up towards 6 a.m. UK time. I was feeling pretty low. I have to be honest with you, Yas. I don't know if I'd got my intake balance quite right. I'd had 2 or 3 hours sleep, no more than that, because I was at Lord's last night. I think it was last night. Maybe it was just earlier this morning. Who knows? And there was a kind of a wearying predictability, I suppose, about how England lost 5 wickets for 12 towards the end of their innings. And it felt like they had a great opportunity that had slipped through their fingers at that point. But I've never seen this team under this regime bowl as insistently as that pace attack did in the second half of the day here. It was propulsive and thrilling, and it looked like just for a glimpse, just for a moment, and I'm not throwing this forward, but it looked like how the really, really good teams do it in history, that if one doesn't get you, then the other one's gonna. And there's no way out. There's no hiding place. This was their dream. This was what they tried to create. This was the inception of this squad. But there was still an enormous leap of faith required to imagine that they would get to this point where they all click in sync. They all appear to be fit, and they dovetail and they complement and they come at you hard as a group. And Australia, gnarly, tough, relentless in their own way, proud. There's a refusal to buckle against the English at home, which has been proved decade after decade. But this afternoon, evening, morning, whatever it is, they had nothing. They had no response to it. And it was spectacular cricket to watch. Today is probably, and I'd be interested to see where you stand on this. Today's probably the most gripping day's cricket that I can remember in a long, long time, perhaps ever, really, because it felt with so much put on this particular game, gargantuan proportions of importance on this particular game with Australia 2 great quicks down. And the notion as well of England probably having to get a result. So the perceived wisdom was they had to get a result in this game in order to get a leg up in the series. With everything that was riding on it, I can't remember a day's cricket quite like this. For emotion as much as gripping spectacle.
Well, yeah, we'll spend more time on England's batting later on. But it felt like this was the batting performance that people who don't like Bazball imagine England have more often than it actually happens. They don't actually have days like this that often. With the ball, England have planned for fielding an attack like this for a very long time, but actually have very rarely fielded attacks anywhere near this. If you go back to the summer just gone, Chris Wokes was opening the bowling at 79 miles per hour for the whole summer. England were brilliant. There's a lot of chat on the Discord about how England's 172 all out, although Stark was brilliant, Australia collectively weren't brilliant. One of my first thoughts in the day was, blimey, England have to win this. England have to win this, because the drop-off between Stark and the other two seamers, I thought Doggett bowled okay. He picked up 2 important wickets later on. Boland went at more than a runner ball, and England looked very comfortable against him. I thought England need to win this. And then when England collapsed like they did, you think, oh no, this was their chance in the series. Even though it's the first test match, this feels like the biggest one, and it feels like the one that they really have to win. It felt like they let that go. And then with the ball, we haven't actually seen this England attack together before. And I thought, even though he didn't take a wicket, I thought Atkinson was the one who really set the tone up top. Archer obviously gets weather-ruled early, but Atkinson was the one that made Labuschagne and Smith really hop early doors. And I was saying this to video editor Dan before we started recording. Quite often you say about English batting lineups that you don't know how good they are sometimes because of the opposition they faced. I think you can say the same with this Australia batting lineup. As good as some of the bowling attacks that they've come across recently, how many performances from whole attacks would they have come across like this, even in the last 12 months where they faced South Africa in that WTC final, who were brilliant, India with Bumrah last year? To have 5 seamers coming at you like that, I'm not sure this Australia side have come across that very often. I just had Justin Langer on the TNT coverage before we started recording, and one of the first things he said was, yeah, I didn't see that coming. And I think a lot of Australians wouldn't have seen that coming, because England haven't fielded
with regards
this
to the attack
before. Yeah, exactly. Next up, Phil, did we see just how good Ben Stokes can be as captain today? He's not always the game changer as skipper, as we sometimes say, but I thought today, both with the ball, but also the way he marshalled the troops was quite something.
I'd go even further than that. I think he's conducted himself ominously from an Australian point of view in the last few days building up to this game. There is so much angst attached to this fixture. And in every interview he's given, he has exuded a kind of almost sort of like preternatural composure and control, and an inner confidence and an inner faith in what he's done and what he's doing. What he's done to get to this point, to select this group of players, and to form and craft them and mould them around his and McCullum's idea of how to play Test cricket. And now to get to this point and to orchestrate this afternoon session, this evening session, in front of literally 51,000 people, and to make it his own cauldron. This citadel belonged to Stokes. There was that sense of anticipation when he came on to bowl because of how brilliant he was over the summer. And then you saw that this remarkable knack that he has, this skill that he has of simultaneously bowling and bending the game to his will, while also directing the field at the same time and working out who needs to come on at the right time at the other end. We saw this at Lord's on the final day against India, and it was a masterclass. It was almost showboating. It was kind of captaincy showboating. You don't often get that, but you got it with him at Lord's against India, and they won the game by 20 runs. And you had something similar at play here. There was a kind of unstoppable inevitability about it once he got the ball, and once he got that first one, once he got that first wicket. After that, the game was in the palm of his hand. There was one incredible moment when, who did he get out? I think it was Carey. It was Carey who he got out towards the end, where he does this thing, Stokes, and again, he is kind of playing to the gallery up to a point, but he throws his arms up in kind of supplication, and he's saying, come on, boys, You need to be there. I've told you this already. You need to be there. You need to be 5 yards finer. You need to be 2 yards squarer. You need to be a bit straighter. You need to be slightly behind point. And he was doing this almost like kind of, Tom Cruise or whatever in front of a screen.
For me, the moment of the day was when he gets Cameron Green out, because I worried, and I know you were too, that Atkinson drop off Green's bowling, Green's batting, when Green was on 5, Australia were 48 for 4, drops in there, it would have been 48 for 5, and then Head and Green looked pretty good. As you say, Green looked very, very secure, actually. I thought him and Pope, two guys who do not have an Ashes record behind them, were probably the two most stable batters of the day. And it felt like that could be the partnership that takes the game away from England. The bowlers are a little bit older, the bowlers are less fresh. Stokes moves mid-off straighter, creating a bigger gap between point and mid-off. Cover is completely open. He then bowls a perfect delivery for his new field, hangs it out, just full of a length, outside off stump. Green looks to drive when he hadn't really been driving up until that point, and he feathers one through to Jamie Smith behind. That was both good captaincy and also really skillful bowling. And it was at such an important point of the day.
But he also physically acknowledged it afterwards. He was showing the cameras and everyone watching and the whole Australian cricket culture, basically, this is what I was doing. And that kind of confidence, that is ominous from the host's point of view. He has that ability to mold the game around the power of his own personality. It's a remarkable thing. And just finally on that Carey thing, literally the moment after he'd thrown his hands up like this and said, "You need to be here and you need to be there," he uppercut one straight down to Bryden Castle, who took one at kind of a finish deep third. That final session belonged to Stokes, but in some respects, the build-up has belonged to him as well. I think he's been excellent. I think in how he's dealt with the inevitable sort of like maelstrom of bullshit that goes around in the build-up to any Ashes series, and I think he's been superb. This was coming. He has a curiously average record, really, in Australia. He took 6 for on his first outing back in 2013, and he made that 100 at Perth. But aside from that, he didn't have a great 21, 20, 22. And he is due. He is due in Australia, really. And he owes English cricket a bit in Australia. Infamously, he wasn't there in 17, 18. At the halfway point, they were already staring down the barrel to make 170 on what looked to the naked eye like a relatively flattish kind of pitch that flattened out after the first 20 overs. We thought that's at least 150 shy,
and still sort of does.
Yeah,
we'll get more. Phil, in the after show that's available just on the Patreon, we'll get more onto individual performances today. But one thing I wanted to make sure that we covered was you were messaging me every single time Steve Smith played and missed today. He only scored 17, but could have been out 5 or 10 times in his short stay. I was watching it thinking he was batting like a man who looks like he's been up all night watching old episodes of Celebrity Mastermind. I don't know what you think. On the pitch, and 19 wickets falling a day, you immediately think that's not a great deck. I actually thought it was fine. Like it did a bit with the new ball, and you had brilliant new ball bowlers on show from both sides. And actually, in the brief periods where Australia strung a partnership together, conditions looked pretty normal. Well,
top of my head, Khawaja's ball leapt.
Yes.
From cast, leapt off a length. I think it hit the seam, the scrambled seam, landed on the seam, and it kicked. And there wasn't much he could have done about that. But I can't think of any other deliveries that were broadly unplayable, really, across the whole of the day. And yet 19 wickets fell. Can you think of any?
No, that was the one. That was the one that I thought before we started recording. That was the one that felt spicier. But even then, it's a 6'4" bloke bowling at 88 miles per hour, hitting the pitch really hard. Like sometimes that happens as well. Yeah, I mean, before we end the show, Phil, what did you make of England's performance with the bat? This game is still very, very much in the balance. England are, sure, just about ahead, but given how well they've bowled, it feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity how they fell so dramatically with the bat at the end of their first innings.
Yeah, at the end and at the start. I thought Crawley's shot was irresponsible, even when you price in the almost unique way that he goes about his cricket. The percentages are so out of his favour to be playing that shot on the up in the first over against a new ball, against, let's be honest, Australia's only outstanding seam bowler in this team. And, you know, it's another $1 million shot. And it frustrates me because he's better than that. And he needs to respect himself more than that, I think. And I know that this is how he plays and all of that. And I know that he does unusual things up top when it works. And it gives England an unusual start in cricket matches. But I thought everything considered, with the moment, the pressure, the anxiety around it all, the huge build-up, I thought that was a really, really lamentable shot. Thereafter, I thought Root looked skittish. And England lost 5 for 12 at the death. But I think that needs to be contextualized a little bit. I think Smith was onto a bit of a bum deal, really. He's batting at 7, and I wonder if, in the fullness of time, Stokes moves to 7 and Smith moves up to 6, because he's so dangerous in that middle order. But you sometimes feel like he's not getting enough out of himself because he's left with the tail. Clearly, 3 shots went down to the cross bat hook. The one slightly ironic one was actually Brooks' dismissal, because
100%.
I thought he'd approached the short ball situation quite well. Really, he was looking to go up to down rather than down to up. There's been a lot of noise around how he's going to play the short ball with long boundaries and men posted out and so on. I thought he had a pretty good game plan, actually. But if anything, he was a victim of his own timidity. I mean, when do you ever say that about Harry Brook? But he just gloved one when he was trying to get out of the way of it. Another day, that would have been a pretty good option, I think. And he looked relatively in control, I thought, of his game. Overall, it felt like a huge missed opportunity because Duckett had looked good for 20 odd. Pope had batted as well as Pope can possibly play at test level, 46. And then, frustratingly, it's his kryptonite when he falls over to the full one and he got pinned LB. But I thought that was a really important innings for him in the context of his own career. And then Brook did what Brook does for 50 odd. And so those 3 played nicely. But every time England got going, they got pegged back. And the cold hard stats are that 4 men broke into double figures. And the rest fell over in a heap. But, look, now if you look at the game situation, it's essentially going to be a 1 innings game. And at worst, really, England are going to have a 20-run lead if they really balls it up tomorrow morning and they give them 30. So England have pulled this game back into their favour, certainly into parity with their noses in front. But the sense was that they couldn't have done much more wrong to get to that point. And if you look at the day in the whole, I would say that it's encouraging for England in the context of the next 24 days of this series, because a lot of marginals didn't go their way, and a lot of errors were compounded on top of other errors. And yet they now look at a situation where Australia have 1 wicket in hand and they're still 50 odd behind.
Yeah, and an incredibly important day tomorrow. Massive opportunity for England to right the wrongs of their performance with the bat today. Bat for most of tomorrow, and you think they've got a very good chance of going 1-0 up. That's it for today's daily show in association with Riverside. If you want more from me and Phil, head to our Patreon channel for our first Ashes after show, where we'll talk in much more detail about some of the individual performances, including Stark's 7 for, Pope's 46 and Brooks' half century, how the 2 sides are shaping up, and more. Thanks to RIVERSTONE for supporting the Ashes Daily, luxury London living that keeps you independent, inspired and connected. If you don't feel like slowing down but rather enjoying more of life, head to riverstoneliving.com and get in touch with them for a tour today.